Aren't you tired of having the same storage issues on Hunter raid after raid? Or maybe you're tired of your Shaman pulling all the extra mobs with their totems and ruining the raid. Well, lucky for you, because Season of Discovery Phase 2 is coming, and it might just solve all of your problems. So if you're ready to transform your gameplay in Season of Discovery and dominate Phase 2, keep watching to learn how. So let's have a basic discussion about the problems with classes first. So Season of Discovery has been really fun, but it is still classic. That means every class has a problem, something deep down that frustrates every player that touches the class. Whether inventory issues or strange quirks involving combo points, we've all got something to complain about. And since this isn't Final Fantasy, we can't just play every class on one character. We have to hope that Season of Discovery fixes our biggest problems. So let's talk about every class and the biggest problem each class has that Season of Discovery needs to solve. So first up, let's get into the Druid. Everybody's favorite Wind Fury bot, of course, the most desirable class in the game right now as well. And as casters, they're the strongest PvP class in the game with spells like Star Surge and Wild Growth. The problems. One of the main grievances for Druid comes from Kiro. He says that it's very annoying when you have to shift out for every potion, for every sapper, every time you pick up the flag in Warsong Gulch as well. In an NG-dominant Phase 2, this just feels so clunky and annoying to have to deal with. The other problem comes from content creator Sarth. He mentions Druids not having a consistent res being a real problem. The solutions. So for potions taking you out of form, we definitely need some kind of new rune or a little quality of life update. As for the res, this is definitely something that could be fixed with an Ice Neck or a Bracer rune, giving Druids the utility they really deserve. Let's move into the Hunter. So the Hunter is everybody's favorite nerf punching bag, though they're sure to continue to be dominant next phase. That's with new talents like Bestial Wrath buffing Hunters even more than before. The problems. So Hunters have a major problem, which the viewer Hylaw brought up. Their runes simply aren't very fun. You have essentially one choice per slot, and the original cool designs around runes like Lone Wolf have been completely abandoned. As for a secondary issue brought up by Nico, Hunter inventory Tetris is just a waking nightmare. We only get limited inventory slots, and to be forced to fill them with stacks of arrows and bullets is extremely frustrating. The solutions. So first, we've got to go back to the original ideas around runes like Lone Wolf and even Carve. Melee Hunter is just an awesome idea, especially a melee tank hunter. New updates to runes to make bow damage more reliable while lessening the relevance of pets would be amazing. And new melee runes that synergize with Carve to finally build out that melee tank hunter of our dreams. Meanwhile, they've definitely got to do something to increase the stack size on arrows and bullets. Or they could go full Final Fantasy MMO and just not even use ammo as the primary resource. The Mage. Mages are the gods of AoE farming, clearing entire instances by themselves, and of course, they're great vending machines as well. The problem. The biggest problem with Mage is that they're going to spend the entirety of Phase 2 just being simple vending machines. Their new max rank water may be BIS, but it's only craftable in increments of 2 each. The solution to this one is super easy and maybe a little controversial. The Mage Table rune. Yes, mages act like their Mage Table is the most costly and sacred spell in their entire spellbook. But there's no doubt the Mage Table would fix the most annoying problem that mages have while easily streamlining raids. The Paladin. The Paladin is perhaps the most iconic class in Vanilla WoW, blasting out solid damage for the light of course, while also providing a variety of buffs for their allies. The problems. The biggest problem with Paladin is that their 5-minute buffs are just way too short in a serious raid environment. In a pug situation, that leads to you never getting rebuffed for the rest of the raid, which is really frustrating. The other problem for Paladin is once they reach level 40, they're arguably going to be the least mobile and the most clunky class in the entire game. They're easily going to be the most kited class in PvP. The solutions. The easiest fix for the buff problems is just to bring in the Greater Blessing system from Wrath with a 30-minute duration. You could put in a rune in, say, the belt slot, and it would allow entire clears of Gnomeregan to take place without having to rebuff at all. I'm curious what you think about these sort of quality of life rune ideas. Do you need every single rune to be Divine Storm, or would you be okay with some simpler, more quality of life runes as well? As for the mobility issue, bringing in something like Unbound Freedom seems like a very strong option. That would give Blessing of Freedom a 30% movement increase for a short duration, or alternatively just give us Divine Steed for 3 seconds of 100% movement speed. The Priest. The best healer in Phase 1, the carry of Warsong Gulch, the best healer in raids and speedruns alike. Everybody loves Priest, but what could we do to make them the perfect class in Phase 2? So, Priest has 2 major issues. The first is the cost of buffing spells like Fortitude. It currently costs me 4,000 mana to buff my entire raid with Fortitude, which is no wonder I always seem to be at 0 mana. Meanwhile, the other Priest problem is the lack of mobility. In a game where classes like Warriors have single-minded fury and they're just sprinting through the entire game, Priest just kind of feels clunky and outdated by comparison. We're the slowest class in all situations, compounded by the fact that we spend half of the raid drinking. The solutions. The first solution is greater style buffs that are either party or even raid-wide. These could easily fit into a low-impact rune like the Bracer slot and immediately fix most mana issues related to Priest. The second solution is some sort of mobility, whether it's body and soul or feathers or something else entirely. There's also a cool scholar spell in Final Fantasy called Expedient. That would give your entire party a small movement speed buff, which I really wouldn't say no to. The Rogue. So rogues look to be a top DPS spec in Phase 2. They're going to be destroying their enemies with new runes like Saber Slash and Deadly Brew. The real question is whether mechs and Nomergano bleed oil or not. Even if they don't, rogues are still sure to be a top DPS pick in Phase 2. The first rogue complaint comes from a Wowhead community post. That complaint is that rogues don't share combo points across targets. This is a huge inconvenience because you can't mouse over kick a target without losing your combo points. The second complaint is that rogues bring almost no AoE to the table. Now, not every class has to be good at everything, but rogues really lag behind in AoE. That is really bad because Nomergon's going to be a raid where you're pulling the entire raid all at once, not really having any downtime or breaks. It just hurts rogues more than other classes. The solution to the first problem would be to finally allow combo points to be saved when switching targets. Now you could kick a boss without having to worry about losing all your DPS. This would be a great perk of an upcoming minor rune like a Bracer slot. Meanwhile, on the AoE front, we all know what has to be done. Rogues finally deserve to get Fan of Knives in Phase 2. Yes, it's going to make them extremely strong and very annoying at AoE, but everybody knows it needs to happen. The Shaman. The ultimate level 40 class, they're raining down their chain lightning at an alarming rate from max range. There may not be a single higher burst class at level 40. Plus, they even bring Wind Fury to the party as an added bonus. The problems. Shamans suffer from vanilla-era clunkiness around their totems. They're not able to quickly recall their totems, which means it's all too easy to accidentally pull a trash pack while you're rushing through Nomergon. Plus, their weapon imbues feel archaic, very outdated. This comment from Tharpoon sums everything up. We shouldn't just have to keep reapplying weapon imbues like Rockbiter, it feels outdated. As for the totem solution, we just need to have totem recall as a minor rune addition. Meanwhile, I'd love to see a minor rune that increases weapon imbue durations from 5 minutes to 30 minutes. That would really modernize the weapon imbue system. The Warlock. The strongest casters of Phase 1, they look to get even stronger in Phase 2. At least if you don't plan to play Affliction. The problems. The first problem with Warlock, as with all casters, is that spell ranks really crush the viability of Warlock in Phase 2. Sure, Destro will be strong, but Affliction is stuck with a level 34 Corruption. That deals less damage than the current Void Plague. Then there's the clunkiness around their consumes like their Hellstone. Feels like barely anybody's even used a Hellstone in Phase 1 because of how annoying they are to pass out. So solving spell ranks is pretty much an unsolvable problem. One option would be to finally scrap skill ranks entirely and give us auto-scaling spell ranks, much like our runes. What do you think about spell ranks? Should they just kind of be left alone, or should Blizzard finally step in and do something? As for Hellstones, this is where a Soulwell rune could really come into play. That would save countless hours of passing out Hellstones. The Warrior. The god DPS class of Phase 2, at least on paper. Blasting huge mortal strikes, or maybe Death Wish if you live the Fury lifestyle. The problems. The biggest warrior problem I can see is that no matter what runes they add, it feels like warrior just keeps scaling better and better and better. The other problem comes from content creator Sarth, who mentions that Battle Shout upkeep is very frustrating, especially when so many pug warriors just let the buff drop all the time. The first solution is that new runes need to be added to give us unique ways to play the class. Perhaps something like the Gladiator Stance rune, or tweaks to make runes like Frenzied Assault more viable. Right now, everybody's forced into the same 3 runes, and it feels very limiting. One thing I wouldn't mind would even be something crazy like some self-healing runes. It works in Final Fantasy, why not in WoW? As for Battle Shout, a quality of life belt or neck rune would make a ton of sense. Just increase Battle Shout to something like 10 or 15 minutes at the cost of a minor rune. The recap. So every class has something that's lacking, whether mobility for the Paladin, quality of life for the Mage. Key problems like buff durations on classes like Shamans, or combo points dropping when you go for that big interrupt on Rogue. But with Season of Discovery, these holes can finally be patched up in your favorite class. I would love to hear from you in the comments below, just like I did for this video with so many viewers like Hylaw and Nico and more. What change do you want to see for your favorite class in Phase 2? I personally want to see way more Priest mobility. I want to see the most mobile class possible in Arathi Basin so I can finally take home that big Arathi Basin tournament championship. After winning that championship, I could finally dream of asking you to subscribe and like this video, because that would be the ultimate prize for winning such a tournament. Either way, you'll definitely want to be subscribed, because my ultimate Nomergon consumable and bisque guide is coming next week and you don't want to miss it. Also, do not forget to check out the last Nomergon video in this series, all about lore and the evolution of the dungeon and the raid. You don't want to miss that video, go check it out.